Hello, friends, and welcome back to another episode of the Juicebox Podcast. I want to jump right into this one, but Liz is back. She's a returning guest, and today we're going to talk about a lot of stuff, but mainly we talk about how she's using low-dose naltrexone. Now, you either heard that and thought, ooh, interesting, I can't wait, or I don't know what that is. Either way, hang out for a second, it'll all become clear. Nothing you hear on the Juicebox Podcast should be considered advice, medical or otherwise. Always consult a physician before making any changes to your healthcare plan. Don't forget to save 40% off of your entire order at CozyEarth.com. All you have to do is use the offer code JUICEBOX at checkout. That's JUICEBOX at checkout to save 40% at CozyEarth.com. When you place your first order for AG1 with my link, you'll get 5 free travel packs and a free year supply of vitamin D. Drink AG1.com/juicebox. Don't forget, if you're a U.S. resident who has type 1 or is the caregiver of someone with type 1, visit t1dexchange.org/juicebox right now and complete that survey. It will take you 10 minutes to complete the survey, and that effort alone will help to move type 1 diabetes research forward. It will cost you nothing to help. Today's podcast is sponsored by US Med. usmed.com/juicebox. You can get your diabetes supplies from the same place that we do. And I'm talking about Dexcom, Libre, Omnipod, Tandem, and so much more. usmed.com/juicebox or call 888-721-1514. This episode of the Juicebox Podcast is sponsored by the Eversense 365. That's a CGM that lasts a full year. Eversense CGM.com/juicebox. 1 year, 1 CGM. Liz has been on the podcast in the past. She was in an episode called
Blackberries to the Rescue.
Blackberries to the Rescue. You should go check it out. It's a very interesting conversation that culminates with a story of her husband and son, both type 1s, out on a hike. The low snacks got used up on the son. The husband gets super low, saves his life with berries on the, it's a great story. You should go listen to it. But Liz comes back today because a lot's happened in her family over the last couple of, how long would you say?
I'd say the last year. Yeah. So we have 4 kids, and my oldest is the one with all the medical stuff. So he has type 1. He was diagnosed when he was 12 months old. And then a couple months later, he was diagnosed with severe food allergies. And when he was about 8 or 9, he was diagnosed with what I now know as Hashimoto's. At the time, I just thought it was hypothyroidism. Yeah, so the reason why I wanted to come on was mainly the thyroid and autoimmune stuff that we had pop up in our family this last year. So I'll start with my daughter. So she was 12 at the time last year, and she normally loves school. She's a great student, and she started just missing so much school and getting really tired. Sometimes it was like her head was hurting, sometimes her stomach, sometimes her joints, just extreme tiredness. So she missed a lot of school, and I took her to a walk-in doctor and asked just for autoimmune screening because we have a lot in our family, and it came back that she has Hashimoto's. That sort of started me on, I guess, a deep dive of researching Hashimoto's and thyroid. And I knew since her TSH was optimal, I knew that it could be years, and maybe she won't ever need it. Hopefully that's the case. But I knew that she wasn't going to be treated by a doctor for her symptoms, or even acknowledge that the symptoms that she was having were related to thyroid. So anyway, I just started researching. At the same time, my son, who was 17 at the time, in October, his TSH was also optimal, but his endocrinologist wanted to lower his dose because he'd lost some weight. I reluctantly agreed because he already was sort of symptomatic, even at that optimal dose, but he's kind of always been like that. So they lowered his dose. And when we retested it, the educator said, the doctor's happy with the number. There's no need to change the dose. And I asked what it was, and it had gone from 0.4 originally, and it had jumped up to 4.7 or something at the high end of the range, which is not optimal. Mm-hmm. And he was also feeling more symptomatic. So I had to basically beg her to adjust the dose. And I asked her if she wasn't willing to go back up in a dose, could we just alternate? She said to me, there's absolutely no medical reason. And I want to stress this to you. There's no medical reason to adjust his meds, because if he's feeling anything, it's not related to his thyroid because he's in range. And she said, it'll make you feel better. We can alternate the doses and try that.
Yeah.
So
how did that make you feel that they said there's no reason to have this medication, but that you continued to ask, and then they were like, okay, fine, you can have it then?
Yeah. I feel like she was like, anything to just make this intense woman get off my back.
Isn't it strange though? Because too much thyroid medication is also bad.
Mm-hmm.
So if the doctor really believed that it was going to be too much, this is my assertion.
Yeah, she could have just flat out refused, but
I'm saying she wouldn't have given it to you if she thought it was going to cause a problem. So I think what that story tells you is she didn't know either. And then she tried to put it on you, right? I believe the kids call this gaslighting. Am I right? Do I understand gaslighting correctly?
Yeah.
All right. Yeah. That's what she does, right? She puts it on you.
Mm-hmm.
There's no way she doesn't think, that might be what's going on here, but I don't want to put my name on it. We'll let the mom take the responsibility.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's shitty is all I'm saying. So
yeah, it felt pretty shitty, actually.
Okay.
Yeah. So anyway, I was very, even though I wanted to put him back on his original dose, I was like, if I do that, the blood tests will be different. So I was very faithful. I alternated the doses. And then I got a phone call from her at the next check, and his TSH had jumped up to 7 something. And she said, okay, at this point, even though he's probably not feeling symptomatic at this point, but we will go back to his original dose. And so we went back to his original dose, which was still, likely not enough at that point because he was also growing and still feeling worse and worse and worse. And at the next blood test, he had jumped up to 31, his TSH. Mm-hmm. This all spanned from October to May. This is his grade 11 year, and he ended up missing so much school. And there was other stuff going on as well. I can't say it was all his thyroid, because we found out that he had other allergies that were undiagnosed because he was having reactions as well. So, he was having severe gastric upset, and some of the times he was missing school, it was because he just couldn't drag himself out of bed, probably because of his thyroid. And then other days it was, because of allergy stuff. And while this was all happening as well, I came across an article that said,
this episode of the Juicebox Podcast is sponsored by the Eversense 365. Get 365 days of comfortable wear without having to change a sensor. When you think of a continuous glucose monitor, you think of a CGM that lasts 10 or 14 days. But the Eversense 365, it lives up to its name, lasting 365 days. That's 1 year without having to change your CGM. With the Eversense 365, you can count on comfort and consistency 365 days a year, because the Eversense silicone-based adhesive is designed for your skin to be gentle and to allow you to take the transmitter on and off to enjoy your shower, a trip to the pool, or an activity where you don't want your CGM on your body. If you're looking for comfort, accuracy, and a 1 year wear, you are looking for Eversense 365. Go to eversensecgm.com/juicebox to learn more. You've probably heard me talk about US Med and how simple it is to reorder with US Med using their email system. But did you know that if you don't see the email and you're set up for this, you have to set it up. They don't just randomly call you, but I'm set up to be called if I don't respond to the email because I don't trust myself 100%. So one time I didn't respond to the email and the phone rings at the house. It's like, ring, you know how it works. And I picked it up. I was like, hello. And it was just the recording. It was like, US Med. Doesn't actually sound like that, but you know what I'm saying. it said, hey, I don't remember exactly what it says, but it's basically like, hey, your order's ready. You want us to send it? Push this button if you want us to send it. Or if you'd like to wait, I think it lets you put it off like a couple of weeks, or push this button for that. That's pretty much it. I pushed the button to send it, and a few days later, box right at my door. That's it. usmed.com/juicebox or call 888-721-1514. Get your free benefits check now and get started with US Med. Dexcom, Omnipod, Tandem, Freestyle. They've got all your favorites. Even that new eyelet pump. Check them out now at usmed.com/juicebox or by calling 888-721-1514. There are links in the show notes of your podcast player and links at juiceboxpodcast.com to US Med and to all of the sponsors.
If you are allergic to grass and you have asthma, which he is both, there's a chance that you could be reacting to one of the filler ingredients in your thyroid meds, and it's acacia. It's from this tree, the tree doesn't grow anywhere near us. So it's not like he would be reacting to the pollen, but it's related to the grass stuff, So I knew it was a long shot, but I was like, I know he's allergic to something. Like there's something happening that I should be able to figure out. Okay. And he's suffering and I can't figure it out. Right. So I think this was before we knew his TSH was 31. So at this point, the endo's thinking he's 7, probably going down. He's probably fine thyroid wise. Anyway, so I wrote her an email saying, I think there's a chance. I said chance, I'm not positive, right? But I was like, if there's any possibility, I would love for him to try a different med, but there's so few meds that he can try in Canada here. Like we don't have that, the Tirosint up here yet. Yeah. And so it was like, maybe we could go to a compounding pharmacy, get it without the fillers, just, and I will have the allergist test for it. And I realize it's a long shot, but,
what the heck?
There's a chance, right?
Keep in mind, you're talking about 8 months this has been going on for him.
Yeah. She was, she contained her
disdain for you.
And so she's like, okay, I highly doubt it. But if you want, we can go that route. And by the time I, heard back from her, he did have an appointment at the allergist a week later. So it was like, okay, we'll see what's happening. But I did feel that, I was being, she, in her mind, she thought I was crazy because she already, she kept on saying, whenever I would bring up the word optimal for thyroid, she's like, well, we have very different ideas of optimal. And there's no reason to think that any symptoms he has, it's not really. Oh, and then at the same time, I had been asking to know if he in fact had Hashimoto's, because I was like, could we get his antibodies tested? Because I'd like to know. I think it's good for him to know if he does in fact have Hashimoto's or just hypothyroidism. And, chances are, and to their credit, she's like, we don't need to test antibodies. There's no reason to test antibodies. And we're not going to. Because
what's the reason against testing for them?
Well, I think it's a money thing. Like I did find out one of her phone calls, she called back and she's like, I did look again in his chart because she'd said she'd already looked in his chart and he'd never been tested. And then she said, I looked again. And in 2012, when he was diagnosed with needing thyroid meds, his antibodies were tested at that time. And it does show that he has Hashimoto's.
Yeah, I would have said, why was it necessary then, but not now? Like, I feel like you just make things up when you're talking to me is what I would probably have said. But okay, go ahead.
I feel like what it is that, the government has mandated that they don't test antibodies because it saves money. And then they have to come up with a reason to defend that. Otherwise, if they told their patients that are asking for it, we really think that would be a great idea to test for them, but we can't. I don't know. Like I'm trying to reconcile why they said all this stuff.
By the way, I don't mind that there are financial reasons to do things and not do things. I mind the lying.
Mm-hmm.
I mind the making things up because then you cling to those reasons. Like, you know what I mean? Like the doctor said. So down the road, you might use that as a reason to justify something else when the truth is it feels like they're just saying whatever shuts you up.
Yeah. And I said to her, I was like, I feel like it's his medical knowledge. Like he has a right to know, if he has this or not, because what if know, what if when
what
he's
if it has
having
other
kids,
impacts on other things too, by the way?
Exactly. Like what if he has kids and he needs to know, look, I have this autoimmune disease, you're going to be more like, I feel like it's his information that he should be privy to. In the meanwhile, like I had found all these research medical journals that states if you have autoimmune thyroid disease, even if you're in range, like before you even start taking meds, you are much more symptom, like you have an increased, it's not in your head, basically what they're saying,
That's why we always tell people, by the way, I'm a guy that makes a podcast. I barely got out of high school, but nevertheless, it's why I'm always saying to people, like, treat the symptoms, not the test result. Mm-hmm. Right? If you have Hashimoto's and you feel a certain way, and that's a symptom of Hashimoto's, but your TSH, the doctor goes, oh, the TSH is okay. Bullshit. I still feel this way. What do you care what the test says? Ridiculous.
Yeah. And my daughter, for a perfect example, so her TSH is optimal and perfect. She doesn't need meds yet. Her free T4 is good. Her T3 is good. They don't do they don't do reverse T3 up here. So I have no idea what the conversion is. Mm-hmm. It's not even an option for the endocrinologist to check off. But yeah, so she was feeling so symptomatic. And my husband also, I mentioned earlier when we weren't recording that my husband, when he found out that my daughter has Hashimoto's, he also has type 1. So he thought, well, maybe I should test myself to see if I have it. And he has Hashimoto's as well. So he's in the same boat as my daughter in that his TSH right now is good.
Yeah.
So neither of them, they might not need meds for years, right? So what I was doing, that whole year, so I was researching a lot on Hashimoto's and what I can do. Is there anything that they could take, my daughter and my husband, to help their symptoms while they're in this sort of limbo state where they don't need thyroid meds yet, but it's not in their head. I can see what's happening. My daughter's hair is falling out and, she can barely move some days because her joints are hurting so badly. And I can't remember where I came across it, if it was on one of the Hashimoto's groups, or I also belong to a Ehlers-Danlos group because I think some of my kids have that. And so it might have, I don't know where I found it, but I came across this drug called low-dose naltrexone. In my mind, it seemed like the perfect answer for both of them. And then me as well, because I was just diagnosed with fibromyalgia last year.
Oh.
So I have a lot of chronic joint pain and everything. So low-dose naltrexone at its normal dose is used for opioid and alcohol addiction. Mm-hmm. And so it's a opioid antagonist, I guess. And so it just blocks the effects of narcotics. They found out that if you take it at a very, very low dose, 0.5 milligrams up to 4.5 instead of the typical 50 milligrams, that what it does is it lowers body inflammation. And it, for a very brief time, like maybe an hour or so, it blocks the endorphins to your brain. And then your brain realizes, hey, I don't have any endorphins. I better make more. And then it sort of spits out extra endorphins. And somehow the mechanism with these extra endorphins is it lowers pain, lowers inflammation, which is not going to cure your autoimmune disease, but it potentially could help you from picking up another autoimmune disease because it's putting your body in a state of, I don't know. So just, I guess, helping with inflammation. It seemed like a very low risk thing to try. There's very few side effects. The main complaint is sometimes people get vivid dreams from it. Mm-hmm. You start off very slow and you titrate up the dose. But then if you decide that it doesn't work for you and you don't want to take it, you don't have to taper down. You can just stop and there's no
side effects from stopping.
Yeah, there's no side effects and there's no addiction to it. Anyway, it just seemed like the answer. So
okay. Who did you start with? Like, because you probably should have gotten like a candy jar full of it and given it to everybody, but where did you start?
I originally asked my doctor for me and she said, no, I do have some patients on it, but before I start you on it, I would want to try these other options. And so she wanted me to try duloxetine, which I forget the other name for it, but it's a pretty hardcore pain med.
Okay.
And researching that, I talked to so many people that had been on it and they were like, run the other direction. I'm sure it does help some people, but it seemed like a scary option to try because a lot of people, they were saying, I was on it for 1 month and then I decided it wasn't for me. There were too many side effects and it took me 2 years to get off of it. And I was opening up the capsules, counting out the beads, trying to
wean myself. What's it called?
Wean myself off. And duloxetine, DUL.
I'll figure it out. Is it Cymbalta?
Yes. Yeah. It's
okay.
Cymbalta.
Okay.
Meanwhile, I had booked through it was our local diabetes Facebook groups. I was sort of venting about all the thyroid nonsense that was happening with my son and daughter. And at the same time, knowing that if things got worse for my daughter, she was going to end up at the same clinic that my son went to, which, they're great for many, many things. But I knew that thyroid wasn't
one of the things they were great at. Yeah.
Yeah. So what can I do to help her in the meantime? So somebody on the group had commented, clinic that I work for, and there's a really wonderful nurse practitioner that is great with thyroid. She's helping me with my thyroid. And so I booked all 3 of them in with her. And before I could even bring it up, like I had all these like arguments why I thought this was the best option for them.
This is like, I'm ready.
But I was ready to go in fighting. I'm ready. She actually brought it up. She's like, well, there's one thing that we could try to help lower their symptoms. And she brought it up. So that's how we got it prescribed for them.
How long did it take for you to notice it helping them?
My daughter I should have kept a journal, but I feel like it was like within the first increase in dose, like maybe nothing the first week or so, but definitely within the first month. I'd say a couple weeks.
So what did you start her on, like a starter dose? How long did that go for? When did you ramp it up? Was this on the doctor's orders?
It goes through a compounding pharmacy. So because they have to take the 50 milligram pill and then, put it in a capsule. And so we started on 0.5. Mm-hmm. It was like every 2 weeks we would go up in dose.
Okay.
So it was like 0.5 to 1. And then, so it took a while to go up. I think she started my husband on 1.5. In 6 weeks, he was up to 4.5. So he went up quicker. She just wanted to go slower with my daughter. Mm-hmm. But yeah, so she was taking anti-inflammatories every day. She was taking Advil every day because she was in so much pain with her joints. And she basically she stopped needing Advil, and it helped her with her energy. She was able to get back to school, and I feel like she's not what she was before this all happened. Like she sometimes needs a little bit more, I guess, repair time after a big weekend, or, I was mentioning to you earlier that she does cheer. And before she was on this, if she would do a cheer practice, I feel like it would take her the whole weekend to get better or to get her energy back, So
any other impacts? So what stick with your daughter for a second. Mm-hmm. What impacts did it have for her?
I think it helps her. Well, for sure, her overall body pain. It's helped a little bit with her energy. And
do you think energy because it's improving her energy? Or do you think that not being in pain is giving her more energy?
It's hard to say. It could be both. Yeah. And I feel, like last year she was coming down with strep throat all the time, or what she thought was, I think it was definitely strep throat once or twice. And then other times, she would just she was always complaining of a sore throat. And I wonder if that was like her thyroid was sort of inflamed and it felt like sore when she was swallowing. I'm not sure.
That doesn't happen now.
Yeah, just energy overall. And
joint pain for her?
Yeah, joint pain. Yeah. Yeah, sometimes it would be in her hips, and then other times it was her back. And, some of it could have been cheer related for sure, because she does a lot of lifting. She's one of the kids that I think has Ehlers-Danlos. So she's very hypermobile and flexible. And one of the things with that is that it's easy to hyperextend and, put strain on your joints.
Is she cracky? Does her back or neck crack, all that stuff?
Yeah, for sure.
Does it feel like you can't get it like to stop? Arden, using Arden as an example, you could crack Arden's back, it'll explode, and you could do it 5 minutes later, it'll do it again.
Yeah, and that's how I am too. I went down so many rabbit holes last year. I went down the thyroid one, the Ehlers-Danlos rabbit hole, and originally I was thinking 3 of my kids and my husband. Have you looked into the Beighton score?
What is this?
For Arden? Have you? It's the scoring system that they use to diagnose the hypermobility one of dealers.
I think that's happened to Arden in a doctor's office before.
Like you get 1 point if your right elbow hyperextends and 1 point for your left, and if your knees hyperextend backwards, if you can touch your hands flat to the floor, bending down, and if you can bend your thumb and have it touch your forearm.
Yeah.
And then, so that's like the major criteria. And then there's other things like hernias and organ prolapse and stretchy skin, all that stuff. I was thinking, and it's hereditary, right? So I was thinking, okay, my husband, he can easily pass. He gets a positive. I've diagnosed him with it. Right?
What a fun date that must have been.
I know.
Honey, come in the bedroom. He was like, "Oh, it's happening," and you're like, "Can you move your thumb towards your forearm?"
1 point.
he's like, "This isn't what I thought was going to happen." But okay, what else? That's awesome. You diagnosed him. By the way, Beighton, BEIGHTON scoring system. If somebody wants to look it up,
I just assumed like the kids, they can all pass it too, right? Like especially my younger one. His middle, like the ends of like the last joint of my fingers, they all bend backwards. I have like the tips of my fingers basically bend backwards, but also the middle joints on his fingers also bend backwards. So he can make a backwards C with his fingers if he bends his fingers.
Hold on. That just gave me the heebie-jeebies. Hold on.
Yeah. He's so stretchy and so bendy. And then middle son, he was doing like party tricks, when he was little, like his head can, like the back of his head, he can bend his back and it basically touches his back,
Wait, the back of his head. Oh, wait.
Yeah. So he can tip his head back and like basically touch the back of his head to his back.
Oh my God. Like a Pez dispenser.
Yeah.
Oh, interesting.
And he used to do this thing where he would bring his foot up, like bend his knee and then bend his foot would end up like on his pelvis, but his leg was pointing down straight. Like it's hard to describe, but he's just super bendy, right?
Yeah, Pez dispenser don't do that. Yeah, that's crazy.
Yeah, I'm going to start calling him that.
Hey, Pez. What you start calling your kid Pez? I want to be invited.
Felix.
I want to be invited to dinner if that happens because if I feel like I'm the one who's like brought that to fruition. I don't think he's going to enjoy that. By the way. Tell me more about like is everyone using low dose naltrexone? Like, and are you going paying for it? Because does insurance cover it?
Well, okay. So now the 3 of them were taking it. So, I had my other son who, the one with type 1 and thyroid, even though he's on Synthroid, I thought, why not? Like him of all people, like he has all this stuff, like let's help him out with his inflammation. He sleeps a little bit better and I think his mood is a little bit better with it, but it's hard, his thyroid numbers are up and down. So my husband and son, they haven't had such a significant, it is helping them. Like, I think it's helped my husband's mood as well. But I think my daughter has seen the most significant benefits from it. But interesting, I wanted to talk about, there's a website, it's called ldnresearchtrust.org. And it has, all the information about it. But before we started taking it, I kept coming across whenever they talk about people with diabetes using it, doctors advise their patients to lower their insulin doses because it does help with insulin resistance. So I was really careful when we started out. I was watching their numbers and they both did have to lower their doses. And especially when we would see it when we were bumping up in dose as well. So it wasn't huge. It wasn't like what you talk about on your GLP episodes, but I'd say maybe 10%, 15%.
I think that's a lot, by the way. I think that's awesome. Yeah.
That wasn't what we were going for, but
you'll take it.
It's for sure.
Take a second and collect yourself. I want to read to people. I'm going to do everyone's favorite thing, read the internet.
Okay.
Low dose naltrexone benefits for autoimmune conditions. Immune system modulation balances an overactive immune response, reduces autoimmune attacks on healthy tissue, helps regulate T cell activity to decrease inflammation, reduces pro-inflammatory cytokines, proteins that trigger inflammation, increases production of anti-inflammatory cytokines, temporarily blocks opioid receptors, leading to increased endorphin production, Higher endorphin levels improve immune system function and reduce pain. Under pain relief alleviates chronic pain associated with autoimmune conditions like joint pain and neuropathy. Reduces central nervous system inflammation, which is called neuroinflammation, which is linked to widespread pain. Slows disease progression, may help the progression of autoimmune diseases like MS or lupus by reducing systematic inflammation. For MS, improves fatigue, spasticity, and neurological symptoms. For RA, reduces joint pain, swelling, and stiffness. For Hashimoto's, lowers thyroid antibody levels and may alleviate fatigue or brain fog. Inflammatory bowel disease, Crohn's, and ulcerative colitis, promotes intestinal healing and symptom reduction. May reduce systematic inflammation, fatigue for lupus. Improves skin and joint inflammation for psoriasis and psoriatic arthritis. Sjogren's helps reduce dryness and fatigue. Systematic sclerosis may alleviate symptoms like pain and stiffness. Reduces chronic fatigue and brain fog, often associated with autoimmune issues, so it can help increase your quality of life that way or by improving sleep. Protects against neurological inflammation, autoimmune conditions like MS or lupus. Minimal side effects. Provides a safer alternative for people who cannot tolerate stronger immune suppressive drugs. For insulin resistance is closely tied to chronic low-grade inflammation. A low-dose naltrexone lowers pro-inflammatory cytokines, so we know that's going to help there. Improves metabolic function. This is all under insulin resistance. Chronic inflammation disrupts the body's ability to use insulin effectively. By reducing inflammation, LDN helps restore normal metabolic pathways. LDN can aid individuals with obesity-related insulin resistance by reducing inflammation. Some studies show it helps regulation in appetite, reduces cravings, which may indirectly improve insulin resistance. It can modulate the gut immune axis. It says emerging evidence links gut inflammation to insulin resistance. LDN reduces gut inflammation, which may enhance glucose metabolism and insulin sensitivity. And there's potential benefits for type 2s as well. So, anyway.
Yeah, isn't it incredible?
I mean,
I'm like, why is not everybody on this drug?
A number of months ago, Arden's Endo tried to give it to us, but it's cash pay here. You can't get an insurance company to cover it.
Okay, so there's a workaround for that. Like, so right now, our pharmacare our government plan is covering ours, which I didn't know it was going to, but that was a pleasant surprise. So there is a deductible on our pharmacare, but we always reach it. I mean, it's huge, but because of all the diabetes stuff, we always reach it. So the 50 milligram pills themselves, I guess, are very, very cheap. And so what a lot of people do that can't afford the med is they dilute it in like distilled water, keep it in the fridge, and then draw up from that the correct dose, so that you'd have to mathematically work out how much water you put in and what the dose is. So that's one way that it can be affordable for people that are not able to otherwise.
Wow.
I am taking it now as well. So I, like I said, I had asked my doctor and she wanted me to try that Cymbalta first. And I was like, no. And then I ended up booking in with the nurse practitioner as well. And she was like, oh, I have no problem prescribing it for you. I mean, that's way more sense to try something low risk before trying something with lots of side effects. So it is helping a little bit. I like my overall pain. I feel like it's helping my immune system. I felt like I was always one of those people that was, I would pick up every cold or get sick, and I haven't been sick since I took it. But yeah, I don't know. I think it's amazing. And I think the reason why a lot of people don't know about it, there aren't a lot of studies because it is such a cheap drug. There's no motivation for people to do studies on it.
I was wondering that because the lady that talked about it for Arden and for Kelly, by the way, she's just a forward thinker. And it did occur to me, like when your doctor was like, no, why don't you try this one that, the salespeople have already told me to tell you about.
I know. It's gross.
It did feel like that a little.
Yeah, I really recommend it. And if people are interested and they want to reach out to me on like through the group, I'm happy to talk to anybody about it. And there is a great Facebook group too, like an LDN Facebook group with lots of knowledgeable people. So I think it's definitely worth trying if you have any autoimmune stuff.
I mean, it's been a benefit for your family so far, you think?
Yeah, just looking at the difference in my daughter, it's made a huge improvement. I mean, she could barely pull it together last year with her school. And so.
Do you think it helped your one son who was having gastro problems? Do you think it impacted that at all?
It's hard to say. So I jumped around. So I was talking about how I thought that he was allergic to the Synthroid filler. And when we went in for testing, what happened with that is that, I brought the actual acacia, I sourced out acacia powder, and then they also tested him. They crushed up one of his Synthroid pills and tested him with that. And he didn't react to that. So I was wrong. Endo was right.
I'm not sure. Is that a thing we brought up in your first recording where we didn't record your voice? Or here? I'm
not sure. Okay. So just real quick. So I was sort of racking my brains, like something, he's reacting to something. I know he's allergic to something. I had this, nagging feeling in my head because he was, had all these gastro issues. And I had read that you could be allergic to the filler if you have asthma and a grass allergy. So I went to the endo saying, I think he might be allergic to a Synthroid. And she, basically looked at me like I had two heads, but she was willing to appease me and try to, go through a compounding pharmacy. And then I had the allergy testing done. So I had to tell her that she was right in that, but I was also right because it turned out that he was allergic to something that we didn't know. And that's what was causing a lot of the gastro issues. So
what did you figure out?
He was allergic to soy, which is in everything.
So does he just breathe air now through a straw with a piece of cotton over it, or how does he?
Yeah, poor guy. I mean, he was already so limited in what he can eat. And at the time, he also had been vegetarian his whole life. He was never crazy about like the meat alternatives, but anytime that he would have one, it was soy-based, so he was just getting...
Oh my gosh, yeah.
Even when he wasn't eating tofu or soy, he always hated tofu, but every once in a while I'm like, just eat it, like you need protein. And then he would eat it. And then, probably for the days after that, he was, having all sorts of issues. And then, it was just very hard to narrow down because it's in everything. And his allergist does say that he's okay with having soy lecithin and soybean oil because they're so highly refined that he didn't think that he was going to react to that. So we kind of eat those foods cautiously and just watch him. But anything with actual soy, like soy sauce or soy protein, or he can't have that anymore. And it does seem like it's helping him. Like, last year we ended up having a colonoscopy and a endoscopy. And because we also thought, well, maybe he's, celiac or maybe he has gastroparesis or something. So
all these different problems, the body is just attacking itself in different places and ways. And it comes out in the real world, the way it comes out. And then it sends you down all of these rabbit holes. And it's crazy almost that the doctors don't start with that. Like, I always think it's crazy that the doctor doesn't start with, what's wrong with you? Well, let's keep in mind, you do have an autoimmune disorder. And the one you have is type 1 diabetes. But that's an indication that your body is looking at itself and going, attack. So like, why would it not happen? Like, just because it manifested in your type 1 doesn't mean it's not happening in other places, smaller places, joints, fingers, your stretchy bits, your ligaments, like that kind of stuff. Like, it could be happening everywhere. Like, and it makes sense that it is, right? Like, so it's just so interesting that we skip over that. And it's, because I don't know if we talked about it in this one or the ill-fated recording, but your son waited 9 months to go to a gastro for the gastro to tell him, like, it seems hard to me.
Well, it was actually, it was more than 9 months because I was looking back on my emails and I had been asking to be referred for 3 years, knowing that something was wrong. Yeah. I mean, I feel like one of the things that I wanted to talk about was just, and we've covered it, I guess, but just knowing that it's okay to push your doctors when you know that something is wrong with your kids. Because had I not taken my daughter in and asked, for the screening for the autoimmune stuff, maybe at this point she would have been diagnosed with depression and be put on depression meds, unnecessarily. And especially with women having this sort of invisible illness where you look okay on paper with your TSH, but you have a raging autoimmune disorder attacking your thyroid. And there's legitimate journal articles out there saying that, yes, it's a thing. You can be symptomatic and feel this happening despite looking normal on paper.
Right. Hey, did your daughter suffer with any acne?
No, not yet.
Okay.
Well, maybe like a tiny little,
but not
thing
persistent or anything.
No, but my second son, who's 15 and a half, he's starting to.
Okay.
So do you have any advice for that?
Well, no, I just, in the last couple of years, Arden's been hit pretty hard. And the only thing that seems to like dull it is the GLP.
Okay.
So as you're talking, I mean, I'd be remiss to say like there's a bottle of low dose naltrexone in my house that's meant for her that we just have never like done anything with.
Oh, okay.
It's like a starter dose.
Yeah, I wonder if that would help.
Yeah, I'm interested because in the end, I think it's inflammation is what I'm thinking. Yeah, right.
Just last night when I was sort of gathering my notes and stuff, like going over, I think like months ago, I sent you an email with like links of all these articles and stuff. So I was kind of going over them again. And one of the recommendations, I think it was like from the American Diabetes Association or something. If you have what I guess it's called polyglandular autoimmune syndrome, like where you have type 1 diabetes and Hashimoto's. If you have somebody in your family that has that, what they recommend is routine screening of all your first degree relatives for other autoimmune diseases. Mm-hmm. And when I went in after finding Hazel, my daughter and husband had that, I went in wanting to have my other two kids screened. And their pediatrician, who I really love, and she's always been great, she was making me feel like I was over the top and overly anxious about even asking that. And she's like, why would you want to do that? Like, there's no reason. Maybe they don't want to know, or,
Wait, tell me that. Start that story at the beginning.
So what I was saying is last night I was going over my notes, and then I came across this recommendation that if you have somebody in your family, what they recommend is that everybody gets screened and then even sent to genetic testing. It kind of hammered home that I wasn't that far off base, right, wanting to get my other kids screened, for Hashimoto.
But the doctor just told you, like, why would you want to do that?
Yeah, she didn't say the word crazy, but that was like, she's like, you're overly anxious. And she's like, and rightly so. You've had a lot, you have a kid with a lot of complex medical needs, but basically chill out. You don't need to like look for it everywhere. It was just, I guess.
Did you say I'm not looking for it? It's here.
It's here. I just want to know, like, so I can prepare, and maybe, I think it's good just to follow your instincts, and I wasn't wrong in thinking that they should be tested, but maybe here in Manitoba, when they have to come up with a reason, when they're checking off that if they're going to get audited or something, for sending unnecessary tests. I don't know.
But it does feel to you like that some of it is about that. Is that they just...
I think so. Yeah.
Cost, and I don't want to get in trouble, like that kind of thing.
Yeah. And then also, she was thinking that it would create anxiety in especially my older son, the younger one probably wouldn't.
I'm stunned that they wouldn't think that actually seeing your kids struggle and be sick would also not bring anxiety. You know what I mean? Like, well, I don't understand, like, something's wrong. Let's not try to fix it. That'll make you anxious. You don't think there's something wrong is making me anxious?
Yeah. Just like, let's just sit back and wait for things to get really bad, before we fix it. And that kind of leads me to another strange thing that happened with me this summer, and I guess potentially still happening. I don't know. So I don't know if you remember on one of your Facebook Live things, I wrote in, I was like, I think I'm getting diabetes. My son and my husband have it. Mm-hmm. The nurse practitioner, she ran the summer, or I guess in the spring, she ran my insulin hormone, just like she did a bunch of blood tests, right? And it came back as not flagged as low, but it was low enough that she assumed that I ate low carb. So she said, okay, so you eat low carb. And I was like, no, I eat like tons of carbs. And she said, well, since it could be anything that's causing it, but since you have access to CGMs, like it might just be interesting for you to put one on and see what's happening. So I put one on. Anytime I've ever done a finger poke, I've always been in the 4s. Like I've never even seen a 5 point something when I've test my sugar.
Right.
And so I put one on, and my average blood sugar was 6.5, and my time in range was like 80% in range instead of, like I assumed I'd be, 96 or 98% in range or something, and I was often in the range, but always on the high end of the range. And every time I would eat, I would go up to, every breakfast, I would spike up to like 11 or 12, and I would come back down, but I would hit like a 12.5, or, I had a 14 at one point, which in my head, I'm like, I have diabetes. Like, this is like, and my brother, who is 55 or something, last Christmas, he was diagnosed with LADA. And he was misdiagnosed as having type 2 for 3 years. But anyway, so in my head, I'm like, okay, my brother has LADA, so it's clearly on my side of the family. And I have maybe just caught it in the very, very early stages. So my doctor gave me a standing order to go get like a random glucose. But every time, I would go and I'd see my blood sugar go, I'm like, okay, I'm 12. Okay, I'm going to get the lab now. And then I would be sitting in the chair and I'd see my blood sugar go down. So it was like, yes, I was hitting those numbers, but I wasn't staying up there. And so I never caught a lab value higher than 9, and had just aged out of the trial net. Like, I had done trial net when my son was diagnosed, but like 16 years ago, and I didn't have any antibodies. But I know that you can develop them at any time. And I know that one of the things that can lead to an autoimmune disorder is being super stressed, which I feel like I've been super stressed the last 16 years.
Yeah.
Excuse me. Sorry. Yeah. So this summer I was like, okay, this is like, I've just happened to catch it at the very early stages. And I found myself in this sort of limbo land again, because I couldn't get into an endocrinologist without a diagnosis. And I couldn't get the diagnosis without the lab result of the high blood sugar, even though I was going up to 11, 12 multiple times a day, but just not staying there. I was coming back down. It's not significant, like I was mostly hanging in the high 6s and 7s, and it's still in range, but it's not, I was never seeing 4s, and I was never seeing steady lines. I was like up and down all the time, and I remember, like you said, you put a sensor on and you couldn't, no matter what you did, you couldn't get over a certain number.
Yeah. I had to eat.
I think it's probably 10. Yeah. Like I'm trying to think the translation of the numbers.
Well, I can get you that. Hold on a second. But I'd eat 3 slices of pizza and then like eat a box of like sugar candy over top of it to get my blood sugar to over 160.
Yeah.
Which would be what, like an 8.9.
Yeah.
And I mean, so I haven't done it in a couple of years now, but I mean, I ate 3 slices of pizza. I was forcing the food down. It was way too much food. So I'm like, here's a whole bunch of fat. Like, let's slow my digestion way down. And then I forget what the candy was, but it was probably something like bottle caps. Like, I was looking for something that was like just sugar. And then I just ate a bunch of that over top of it, like Swedish fish, like that kind of stuff. That's what I had to do, not having diabetes, to get my blood sugar over 160.
Yeah. And sometimes I would be, I was out for a hike and I hadn't eaten in, a couple hours, and I would be like an 8.9 or something. I'm like, this is not right. Like, I know something is off. But then I would talk to my doctor and she's like, well, it's normal. People's blood sugar goes up, and my last A1C was 5.1. She's like, I can't send you to an endocrinologist with a 5.1. So let's wait until you're due for a new A1C. And then we'll go from there. And meanwhile, I had started low dose naltrexone. So I don't know if that played any part in it. If that is somehow helping my blood sugars a bit as well, it's very strange. So in September, I went for a new A1C, and my A1C was 5.1 again.
Okay.
So no change. So I'm like, okay, well, maybe my blood sugar has always been doing this, and I haven't known because I haven't worn a sensor before, which is possible. I've just never seen a number over 4. And then when I was wearing a sensor, I was hardly ever 4. If I did dip down, it was like I would have that reactive hypoglycemia where I'd have a fast acting carb, and then I would tank, and then I would go back up again though. But that was the only time I was into the 4s was after I'd had a fast acting sugar. And then I would drop really fast. I don't know. So I still think something is potentially going on, but then, so I stopped, I can't wear my son's sensors all the time. So, and my numbers were actually kind of gradually getting better. So I was like, I know I'm not in any danger of going into DKA. I'll just keep a watch on it. And so the other thing is only endos can order the type 1 antibody testing. So a normal doctor or any other person in Manitoba can't order that. And I was too old for TrialNet to test it again. So I felt like I was sort of stuck in this point of like, I had to get worse before I could get better. And Tzield is not available in Canada yet, but it's on my list of things. Like I'm going to start making some noise. Like I've spoken to the health minister at a function, like a diabetes function. I was like, we need to start because it's on the pipeline of drugs that are coming to Canada, the Tzield. But as it stands now, if nothing changes, when that drug is available here, if nobody can order antibodies to know if somebody is in the early stages, nope, that drug is not going to be available for people here.
So are you genuinely worried that you have diabetes or will have diabetes, or do you think you're now looking too closely at things? Like
I don't know. Like so again, in September, I retested my A1C and my A1C hadn't changed, but I had also upped my LDN dose as well. So I don't know if that's impacting. I have no idea. Resistance. I don't know what's going on. I know that LADA, if it is LADA, it could take years, before
it would also,
things.
I mean, listen, I'm not saying you're not seeing ghosts or you are seeing ghosts or whatever, but I mean, your husband has type 1, right? Mm-hmm. So it would be crazy if you ended up having type 1 as well.
I know. Wouldn't it? Yeah, it would be weird. But my brother has it.
But your brother has LADA. And
yeah.
And is his LADA still like, is it still LADA? Like, is it still slowly happening, or do you think he's full blown type 1?
Oh, well, I think, no, he's full blown now, but like it was over sort of 3 years when he's funny in that he didn't tell anyone it was happening. So when he thought he was type 2 for 3 years, he didn't tell me, which if he would have told me, I would have been like, go get your antibodies tested.
Yeah, you might have moved him along.
Yeah.
Also, by the way, I want to say, if you do end up, listen, with your brother's situation, your husband's situation, maybe this is the secret sauce to giving kids like a bunch of different autoimmune issues. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? Like, yeah. Maybe you I hate to say, but like maybe you will end up with type 1.
Yeah.
Then you'll be able to step back and go, well, it does make more sense that my kids all have allergies and these different issues and the joint pain. Like it does make more sense now because they're getting it from both bloodlines, basically.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So as it is now, it's sort of on the back burner. Like I'm going to watch out for it. And the other thing is that I lost a lot of weight, and I'm small to begin with. And like over the course of this last year, but it also coincided when I started my ADHD meds, which lowers your appetite a bit. But despite that, I felt like I was still eating, a normal amount. Mm-hmm. I didn't pay any attention to my weight loss because I knew I'd also recently stopped migraine medication that sort of made me gain weight. So I'd stopped that. So it didn't raise any red flags for me that I was losing a little bit of weight. But then in the summer, when all those, weird blood sugars, it sort of dawned on me that, yeah, I had lost a significant amount of weight since the year before.
Yeah.
And, I felt like I was peeing more and more thirsty. And
it sucks that it's all in your head, to be perfectly honest. Like you've been looking into people's health for so long. Mm-hmm. By the way, I've lived through this. I've lived with people going like, hey, stop looking into our problems. And I'm like, you still have problems. Like nobody's really gotten to the core of these issues. Like,
yeah.
Do you really just want to like go, okay, I guess this is it. Like this is as good as it gets. And I think you need to keep looking. But it's funny. It isn't crazy that you could be on the path to it. And it isn't crazy that you might just be looking too hard. That must be frustrating, I guess, is my point.
Yeah. I mean, when it was happening, I was pretty stressed out about it. But now put a sensor on recently just to sort of check in and see what was happening. And my numbers were a lot better, but I was having more lows, which is strange. And again, like, maybe it's the LDN. Maybe there was something that my body was fighting off this summer for a couple months that was creating I have no idea, but it's just, I'm going to keep an eye on it. But it was just, I thought it was interesting in that other people that are living in that experience right now in Manitoba, they are stuck. They would basically have to get to the point where they would go into DKA before they could, it's like you have to get sick before you can get better. And the same thing with Hashimoto's. In Manitoba, they won't start you unless you get lucky and get a doctor that's willing to treat you earlier. The protocol here is you don't even start medication until your TSH reaches 10, and then they put you on meds for the first time. I don't know if when my son was diagnosed, if that's what they waited for him to get to. I'm not sure. But anyway, it's weird. But my son also he has a diabetes alert dog now. His dog had been alerting me, and I thought it was just because, she was looking for attention, or, like sometimes I would go in at night. If I go in to treat a low blood sugar for him at night, sometimes she will alert me. And so I think when he's lying down in bed, she doesn't know like where to paw him. And so I just thought she was alerting me about him. But then when I put the sensor on a couple of weeks ago and saw that I was dipping down, I was like, well, maybe she really was truly alerting me, because she's trained to alert anything below like 4.7.
Yeah.
So if I was, even if I was a 4.1 and I was, this last couple of weeks, I was, getting down into the high threes. So anyway, I thought that was interesting. And
if you end up with type 1, you're going to have the biggest I told you so ever. I mean, it's not going to be super satisfying, but you'll have it.
Yeah. I recognize that about myself is like, I do go down these rabbit holes and I hyper focus on medical stuff because I feel like I have to have all the knowledge for my family, because I know the doctors aren't going to be pulling all the pieces together. And I have great respect for doctors. But I also just know that, like you said, it's not like AI where it's not an algorithm where like, if you name one more symptom, they're not going to say, oh, it must be this autoimmune disease.
Yeah, you can't put it together. Like it's too broad sweeping for, I think, for the generalized human mind to just, especially an endo who's doing a bunch of different things. There's no way that thyroid's on the top of their list. Like, like people know, like we use a doctor that's local here, but she's dug in on this stuff. You know what I mean? Like she's spending her days really like closely considering these things. Most endos are treating type 2s, and you're walking in there going like, I have a thyroid issue. And they're like, oh, thyroid, let me look at the thing. Then it's green on your test. You're okay. I mean, that's really what's happening to you. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So, and meanwhile, I was doing a little like looking while you were talking just now. The observed increase in frequency of Hashimoto's can be attributed to a combination of different factors. So yes, it's been increasing over decades. Partly they think it's improved diagnostic techniques. So that they're, that you have it, that the medical community has become more aware of it. There's also some stuff about iodine intake that could have impacted it, but also environmental toxins like industrial chemicals and pollutants, heavy metals, radiation exposure, hereditary factors, dietary factors, processed food and additives. Increased consumption of processed food may contribute to inflammation and immune system dysregulation, right? Like there's a chronic stress. There's a lot of things that have happened in the last 40 years that impact this inflammation. And I think you're seeing what comes from it now, so.
Yeah. One thing that I wanted to mention too, which I found super interesting on my deep dive, how a lot of doctors endos are reluctant to prescribe an addition of T3 medication. And they say, it's so...
That's not necessary.
It's so rare that it would work, right? So I feel like I discovered... I didn't discover it, but I came across a definitive thing that you would be able to tell if you would be a candidate for the T3, which was super interesting to me. I had no idea, I knew that the thyroid is produced in the body and it, converts and changes and everything. So the genes that are responsible for making your thyroid hormones are called and I could be saying it wrong, the diodinase genes. And there's 3 types of them. There's like the DIO1 and DIO2, DIO3, and they all have their mechanisms. But I found out, and again, this might be a link to your bipolar question that you always ask. So originally when I came across this, I was like, that's when I wrote that email to you. I was like, I have to tell Scott this. Like, this is the link. This is the missing link. If somebody has a polymorphism or a variant in their deiodinase 2 gene, they are the people that need an addition of a T3 med. Isn't that cool?
Wait a minute. Seriously?
Yeah.
Say that again.
Okay. So if you have a polymorphism, a genetic mutation of your deiodinase gene number 2, you are the person that likely needs a combination T4, T3 therapy.
How do we find that out if we have the polymorphism of the blah, 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 blah?
It's specifically called the THR92ALA-DIO2 gene. And there are other...
Hold on a second. THR, go ahead. Boy, hey, listen, you get out. You ever go outside? You ever see the sun? Go ahead, THR.
Okay. So my husband was gone a
year. No, I know.
My husband was gone a year. So this is what I would do at night. I would read medical journal articles.
So go slow. THR
92 ALA -DIO2. So
O or zero? DIO2.
DIO2. Yeah, the DIO2 polymorphism. Deiodinase 2.
I'm asking the internet about the test for it. Boy, you got deep.
It's probably just a genetic, like you would have to go to a geneticist or get your raw DNA sequencing done or.
But if you have this, you need the T3?
Yeah, most likely, I think. And so there's a whole list of things that the people that have this variant have. So I couldn't find any articles that specifically talk about this variant and type 1 diabetes, but it talked a lot about people with Hashimoto's with this variant. And then, so it causes insulin resistance. So a lot of people with type 2 diabetes, this is the genetic factor that would cause them to have type 2 diabetes. Obesity, hypertension, osteoarthritis, dementia, like a lot of neurological things, dementia, thyroid cancer, mild cognitive impairment, bipolar. There it is, bipolar disorder. So the people that have this variant, it could be the cause of their bipolar, I guess. And not to say that if you do have this variant, you're going to have all these things.
Sure. But if you have these things and you go back and find that variant, it's a situation.
Yeah. Or gestational diabetes. Yeah. It's, I don't know. I just found it super interesting.
Yeah. No. And you hadn't had sex for a year, so you were interested by almost everything. Yeah. I don't know. Did we talk about it in the first part where your husband had to go away for a year for work?
Yeah, I talked about it in the first part. But yeah, so he was on sabbatical, so he was gone a lot. And then I felt like that year, it was like the year of health stuff falling apart. So my daughter and my son's thyroid being totally mismanaged, and then my husband getting diagnosed with Hashimoto's, and then he's going for a celiac scope tomorrow. Like his celiac antibodies were at the high end of the range, so not technically out of range, but they're high enough. And he has Hashimoto's and type 1. I'm like, well, yeah, chances are you're gonna. You
guys better get in that bubble that John Travolta had and start eating oxygen. I think that's that maybe is the only answer for you. But yeah, in the end, though, you just are a family that's kind of riddled with autoimmune issues.
Yeah. So I came across another, like, if you're looking for an argument to give to your if your doctor's reluctant to try T3, another thing that you can say is okay, test my ferritin before you give me the T3. And then give me the T3 and then test my ferritin after. And if your ferritin goes up, that shows that the T3 is working, because the reason why your ferritin was low is that you're not having the proper conversion and everything. So yeah, I thought that was also interesting.
That's awesomely interesting.
So the quote was, measuring serum ferritin before and after T3 therapy may prove useful in the diagnosis of thyroid hormone resistance.
Can I have all your notes? Are your notes typed in front of you, or are they written on like...
I scribbled out like 6 pages of notes last night, but I can send you the links to all these things. And then...
Please listen to me.
Yeah.
Send me all the links and take photographs of your scribbles and send me the photographs.
Okay.
And I'll just let ChatGPT turn it into text for me so I can look at it. I would love to.
Okay. You're going to love this. So in one of the last endo appointments, this was even before I found out his TSH was at 31. Luckily, we meet with the educator first. And I love our educator. She's great. She also has type 1. And
you're so nice. You've been in Canada for so long. Everybody, no matter how much they screw you, you're like, I love these persons. They're lovely people.
Yeah. Well, the educator is, she's great. She's great. So I completely vented to her. I said, when we were told about his thyroid, we were told it wasn't a big deal. And, I didn't do my research. And since then, I've learned all the stuff that should have been told to us. And I know that, maybe part of it is they're not wanting to overwhelm the type 1 parents because they know that it's such a big thing that they, it's like minute to minute. But the thyroid is huge. And I didn't realize, I should have put it together because it's the same doctor. It's the same clinic that we see for his thyroid, that we see for his diabetes. But in my mind, they were completely separate and I never connected them. Mm-hmm. But then I find these research articles, and I actually just posted the links of them the other day. Somebody was asking about them on the Facebook group, like if they were connected. They are so closely connected that if one is out of range and mismanaged, it directly affects the other. So for instance, if you have rampant high blood sugars all the time, it's going to affect your thyroid function and vice versa. If your thyroid is not being medicated properly, it's going to make your blood sugar harder to control. And it's like this, you get stuck in this vicious cycle.
Yeah.
I feel like it's important enough that you feel like there should be information sessions. It would also be a way to, for the type 1 parents to connect with other parents. It can be a very isolating, lonely disease when, your friends and family, they try to understand, but you don't really know unless you go through it yourself too, right? So I can see how it would be extra work for them. But when you get diagnosed with diabetes, there's, you go through training and you get sometimes a binder sent home with you, it's like stuff that you have to know. And I feel like there's stuff with maybe not as much, but stuff that you should know with thyroid that we weren't told. And I had to find out. And when I said that to the endocrinologist, I said, I feel like I had to do my own research. And she said, well, you don't have to do your own research.
Did you say, I was waiting on you and it wasn't happening?
Like for instance, so I don't know, maybe you know this, maybe you don't, but did you know that if you go for your thyroid test on like morning fasting, your TSH is going to be significantly higher than if you go like 2 hours after eating, like postprandial. I can't say that. You know what I mean?
Jenny and I went over this. Postprandial.
Yeah.
All right, we'll figure it out.
So I have an article that says like 75% of the patients in this study were reclassified when they tested them with a morning fasting test versus the afternoon test when they'd already eaten. Mm-hmm. Like that's significant. So that means that people could be getting the wrong dose or not getting a dose change when they need one.
No, for sure.
Because, they're like, oh, your number's fine. You're like in range. It could look optimal when it's out of range. Mm-hmm. And so 75% of the people in the study were reclassified as subclinical because...
That's a significant number, by the way.
Very significant.
Also, just listen to Scott. Medicate the symptoms. There. Mm-hmm. I'm taking all the thinking out of it for you. If you have thyroid symptoms and medicate the symptoms till the symptoms are gone.
Yeah. And maybe your doctors are looking at the time that you did your blood, like the time stamp on when you did your blood test, but maybe they're not.
Probably not.
I feel like it's important for people to be aware, either do it one way or the other, but stick with that, or just always do your thyroid test with morning fasting.
I want to tell you, Liz, I'm going to turn this episode around very quickly. And it's the first time I'm going to send it to Arda and tell her, like, I'm not going to pay for college if you don't listen to this.
Oh, and the other thing, did you know about biotin? Like before you do your thyroid test, depending on, I guess, like different labs would use different assays or whatever, but it's really important to stop your supplements that contain biotin before you do your, like a couple days before you do your thyroid test, because that can also falsely lower the lab value. Like it's not going to affect your actual TSH level, but on the lab, it will show up as lower than it is. And also eating, like if you're eating a bunch of foods, like if your diet is like rich in biotin, like eggs and pork, and like you can do an easy Google search of like biotin rich foods. And so ideally you would stop eating those a couple days before your test and stop your supplements that contain biotin, because you don't want to have anything that's going to skew your results, especially if you know you're super symptomatic and you're hoping that your doctor is going to increase your dose. And you go in there and you've had a bunch of biotin and your number looks a lot lower than it is, they're not going to change your dose.
You are a font of information. Look at you.
Right? Why did I have to do my own research, Scott?
I don't know, but at least you did it. This is awesome. Seriously, you should put together a little, like a bullet. Listen, you don't have the outlet for this, but if you put a bulleted list together of the things that you figured out, I would absolutely like put them out for people to look at.
Yeah, I'll do that. I'll do that for sure.
1,000,000%.
Yeah, I don't know. I feel like there is lots of valuable information that should have been presented.
No, for sure. Listen, I have a dream where eventually we can like go into people's. I always have this like dream of like, can you imagine if you took a very smart entity and let it just watch the Facebook group and come up with ideas about like, what are the questions people have? What are the answers to those questions? What are complaints people have? What end up being the answers to those questions? Like that kind of stuff. So you could just, these communities are awesome, right? But it's still sort of, I ask a question, I get my answer, I go away. Hopefully I'm better off. And now my question and my answer disappear. They go off into the ether, right? Which is what keeps, it's also important, by the way, because it keeps the group functioning and like, current so that new people can come in. It is actually really important. But, I look forward to the day when, like, I think I said this in the first interview that nobody's going to hear, but I look forward to the day where we're all just talking to our computer and making sure that it knows everything about us so that it can say, well, have you considered this? Because it can actually keep all this stuff straight. Like you're keeping it straight in your head as best you can, and you're doing an awesome job. And still, it's still storyteller-ish when you're telling it. Like, oh, then this happened. I forgot to mention this. Oh, biotin. Like, you know what I mean? Like what I want is, hey, computer, I'm going to get my blood draw 2 days from now, or 2 weeks from now for my thyroid. What are the things I'm supposed to be doing? Well, stop taking your multivitamin. Don't eat eggs this week. Like blah, 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 because you're having symptoms and we don't want the doctor to see a false number. We want your medication to get adjusted correctly. Okay, great.
Right. The other thing that I had no idea, and again, this was just like when I was going over my notes last night on an article that I had read, but I had missed this tab of it. So they're saying, so people with type 1 that have hypothyroidism, so they have a lower absorption of glucose. Like their body has like a lower ability to absorb glucose. And so there's also like lower hepatic glucose uptake, lower post-absorptive glycemia.
Now you're just making stuff up. But
I know, I'm just making words up. And you need a lower insulin dose in diabetic patients. And then you need to raise your insulin dose after you start replacement therapy. I never knew that. I didn't, I always thought like, why are my husband and son like so prone to hypoglycemic events? I'm thinking it's because I'm bad at managing diabetes. Well, maybe it's because he has Hashimoto's and his body doesn't absorb glucose as much as he should. Yeah. Or maybe when he has an increase in his synthroid, his ratio's a little bit, because maybe now he can have a little bit more insulin. I never thought of the correlation between the two diseases, but it makes so much sense that they're so closely related.
Yeah. And in fairness, even, for me, like if you listen to the Pro Tip series, at some point in there, you'll hear either I or Jenny say that, an ill-managed thyroid issue is going to impact your insulin use, but we don't go into deep, deep conversation about it, but it's absolutely true, and not a thing, again, that people think about, I think.
Yeah.
It's interesting.
Yeah. I thought that was,
it is.
I thought that was very interesting. And especially about the, so that's like the hepatic glucose uptake. That's what I assume they're talking about, like the glycogen stores. right?
Yeah, well, I mean, we need to get someone on this. It's not you, by the way.
Yeah.
Like, you're doing a great job, but like, why isn't somebody digging into this and making this information that's easily digestible, that's shareable, that, you know, everyone shouldn't have to get to the point where they're like, oh my God, I think I'm going to die. I got to figure something out for myself. Like that's you mentioned it earlier, but it's exactly what happened. Like, you got to this point probably because you love all the people that this stuff is happening to. You had a bunch of time on your hands and you were like, you know, like, I got to figure out what's happening to these people. But for most people, they're just going to struggle through their lives. And like you said, struggling can look like a lot of things. It could just be like what comes off looking like a bad attitude, right? Or brain fog, or I'm tired all the time, and how that impacts your life and what you don't do. Or how about, like, you know, gastro issues? Like, oh, I'd like to go to the city and see a play, but what if I can't find a bathroom? Like, you know what I mean? Like, all the different things that happen, to the point where, you know, there are families that'll go generations telling stories to each other. Like, oh, we've just got a weak stomach, you know, or, you know, like, I heard one family say all the time, it's so coarse, but like, they're like, this person like came into this family, right? And one day just said, you guys talk about shitting a lot. But when you look at the family, there's a lot of autoimmune through them. Like, wouldn't it be cool if they didn't have to talk about shitting a lot? Like, you know what I mean? Like, wouldn't it be cool if your daughter didn't need to go to like, you know, take 2 days off to recover from a day of activity? And if there was an answer, and Jesus, what if it was low dose naltrexone? Or, you know, what if it was getting their thyroid balanced out better? Like these things that look like, I think these things that people spend their lives thinking, well, this is just my lot in life. Like, I wonder if they couldn't be helped.
Yeah. Or, you know, it didn't turn out that way for my son, but somebody else could be allergic to their Synthroid or their levothyroxine fillers, you know, because they also are allergic to grass and they can't have, you know, and they should maybe just try another thyroid med.
Exactly. And also, like, listen, if you don't make yourself crazy or kill yourself, you might still figure out what's wrong with your son. Because it doesn't sound to me like you're going to stop.
Yeah. And I feel like, you know, he's been collecting allergies his whole life. And I don't think, I feel like I just can't sit back and relax. You talk about that whiteboard you have in your office. I feel like I have a whiteboard in my brain and I'm always making notes of things that are happening with him and what else could potentially, like, I can't remember what it,
Seriously, take time for yourself. But I think it's great. It shows an immense amount of concern and thought and love. And I'm sure he'll appreciate it one day if he doesn't now. We're a little long here, so I'm going to end by telling you that I really appreciate all the effort you put into all this.
Oh, thank you.
No. No one else is interested. I'm supremely interested in this. And
I knew you'd be interested in the bipolar connection because I was like,
all of it.
I have to tell Scott about that.
No, all of it I'm interested in. And again, this was said in the previous recording that nobody's going to hear, but I shared with you that I take a fair amount of crap from people with type 1 who don't have other issues, who are like, you know, this guy talks about thyroid too much. And I'm like, I mean, and you brought up back when I said that, you said, what was the number? How many in 10 people with type 1 also have thyroid issues?
Oh, yeah. 17 to 30% of people with type 1 have autoimmune thyroid.
Right. So that's worth talking about in a group of people who have type 1.
For the diogene polymorphism, that also is quite common in like the general population. So it's said that it occurs in 12 to 36% of the population. So that's huge as well. So it's not a wild question to ask your endo, you know, like if your insurance is going to cover genetic testing, or if you want to, you know, pay for the sequencing yourself, like I feel like it's worth it to know, you know, if you're one of those people that, you know, this is like a real reason that I need an additional T3 med.
And one day, and probably not in our lifetime, but who knows? I mean, AI is going quickly, but like you're just basically talking about biohacking. You're talking about getting your personal settings correct, you know, with chemicals and et cetera. I don't know. We all grew up with like I don't know, an uncle who was a dick or something like that. Like, imagine if he wasn't. Like, you know what I mean? Like, imagine if your uncle wasn't a dick. What if his ferritin was low because his blah, blah, blah didn't uptake T3, blah, like, you know what I mean? Like, that's unfair for him to live his life that way. And I don't know. Like, I know that's difficult. It's harder. It's, it's easier said than done to figure these things out, but at least if people know to look for them and doctors don't stand in their way when they're looking for them and insurance doesn't stand in their way, I think maybe you get to go live the life you're supposed to live instead of the one,
sure. And like, especially with people with bipolar, like this one article was saying it speculates that bipolar disorder is a form of cerebral hypothyroidism. This one article had great success with giving people with bipolar. It was actually a high dose of levothyroxine, and that was helping these people, like putting these people in remission from their bipolar. Because one theory is that people with bipolar, it's because they can't convert the free T4 to T3.
Yeah.
So, and we have a friend that is going through that. Like, he thinks he has bipolar, and it breaks my heart, like looking at all this information, and there's so much stigma with mental illness, but maybe bipolar is not maybe it shouldn't be classified as a mental illness. It should be classified as a, like an autoimmune disease. And if there's just something like not converting in someone, or, it's an inflammation thing, and I'm
with you. I'm telling you right now, I don't know much, you know what I mean? Like, and you could look at my, my educational background and say, I don't know why we're listening to this guy, but I've just had thousands of conversations with people. And I don't know, it was a few years ago. I was like, why does everyone with type 1, when I ask them about other autoimmune diseases, why does so many of them get to an uncle with bipolar? That just can't be a coincidence, right?
Yeah. So what I think is the link is, I don't think it's the type 1 bipolar link. I think it's the people that have maybe undiagnosed Hashimoto's and maybe this variant.
Yeah.
It's like it's the thyroid connection rather than the type 1. Like type 1 is connected to thyroid, and thyroid is connected to bipolar, maybe. So I think everybody should get their antibodies tested.
Yep. I appreciate this very much. It's a high likelihood that you'll be back on the podcast one day, but let me thank you as if I'm never going to talk to you again. I really do appreciate this.
Okay, thanks. Thank you so much, Scott.
No, will you please send me all the links and your notes and everything? Would you do that?
Yeah. I apologize in advance for my scribbles.
No, I'm telling you, you have no idea. You drop it into AI and you say, transcribe this, and it just writes it out. It's awesome. Cool. I don't know what you people aren't doing out there, but it works so well for some things. And by the way, it doesn't work well for other things. But when you find what it works well for, pretty awesome. Let me let you go. Hold on one second.
Okay. Thanks so much, Scott.
Arden has been getting her diabetes supplies from US Med for 3 years. You can as well. usmed.com/juicebox or call 888-721-1514. My thanks to US Med for sponsoring this episode and for being longtime sponsors of the Juicebox Podcast. There are links in the show notes and links at juiceboxpodcast.com to US Med and all of the sponsors. Today's episode of the Juicebox Podcast is sponsored by the Eversense 365. You can experience the Eversense 365 CGM system for as low as $199 for a full year. Visit eversensecgm.com/juicebox for more details and eligibility. If you or a loved one was just diagnosed with type 1 diabetes and you're looking for some fresh perspective, the Bold Beginnings series from the Juicebox Podcast is a terrific place to start. That series is with myself and Jenny Smith. Jenny is a CDCES, a registered dietitian, and a type 1 for over 35 years. And in the Bold Beginnings series, Jenny and I are going to answer the questions that most people have after a type 1 diabetes diagnosis. The series begins at episode 698 in your podcast player, or you can go to juiceboxpodcast.com and click on Bold Beginnings in the menu. If you're not already subscribed or following in your favorite audio app, please take the time now to do that. It really helps the show. And get those automatic downloads set up so you never miss an episode. Thank you so much for listening. I'll be back very soon with another episode of the Juicebox Podcast. The episode you just heard was professionally edited by Wrong Way Recording. WrongWayRecording.com.